Hello, my sexy little Regency freaks. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite people who's dead, and that's Jane Austen. This video is going to be helpful for people who've never read any Jane Austen before. I'm going to go through the books in the order that I think you should read them. This is based on which books I like the best, but also which ones are easiest to digest, which ones have the most pop culture references. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I love about each one. I'm going to talk about my favorite movie versions of each one, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Regency era, tips and tricks that help you better understand kind of plot lines and stuff like that. And then for folks who have already read all of Jane Austen's works and you love them, then you could just see my personal opinions, and then you can in the comments write your own personal opinions and suggestions, and then we can see who's right at the end. I'm just kidding. We can have a nice dialogue about it because I think this is fun. I'm just drinking straight up water out of this teacup, but I'm really thirsty. Ooh, I hit my tooth. Okay, little fucks, let's dive right in. All right, Pride and Prejudice. Let's just start with the big one. This is the one that has the most pop culture references. You've probably heard the name Mr. Darcy before. I think that if you've never read any Jane Austen, you might as well start with this one. There are so many movie versions of it, and it's just great. It's a great story. Here is a maybe unpopular opinion that I'm gonna give, which is I think that if you've never read any Jane Austen, and especially if you aren't really into classic literature, or maybe you're just not really like an avid reader, but you do want to dive in and start reading some Jane Austen, I highly recommend watching the movie first. Some people might be like, no, but you know what? Honestly, she has so many characters and the plots are all so intertwined. It's like an equation that she has where it's like all these different numbers and stuff, and you go through this like big equation, then you end and it all kind of comes together and makes sense. Does that make sense, what I just said? Sometimes watching a movie where you can put a name to a face, especially because, you know, back then everybody was known as like Miss or Mr. or Mrs. and then last name, and then there's several people with the same last name. It can get a little confusing. You might as well just watch the movie version first. Also, there's so many great movie versions. Very rarely read any books in one day, but Pride and Prejudice is one of them. The reason why everybody loves Pride and Prejudice is because Elizabeth Bennet is an awesome character. She's witty, she's funny, she's smart, she studies people, she understands them, and she makes mistakes. You know, she's got some prejudice. She's prejudiced. And then Darcy is pride. Everybody loves Darcy. It's an enemies to lovers story, but I feel like so many people try to make the Darcy character in current romances and they go too far with it. I can't do Bridgerton. I had to stop. I was like, ooh, triggering, weird. Darcy is kind of like a nice tamed down version of like an asshole who's full of pride and full of himself. Elizabeth kind of pulls him out of his shell. Now, the best movie version of Pride and Prejudice, in my opinion, is the 1995 BBC mini-series starring Colin Firth and Jennifer Ale. It is 6 hours long. So what? You trying to tell me that you haven't binged 6 hours in a day or over the course of a week? You freaking have. So shut up. Get over it. Get ready to binge 6 hours of Pride and Prejudice. It is the entire book front to back. I mean, it covers everything and it's so beautifully done. And it's my favorite piece of television / movie ever made of all time. I've seen it so many times. I would feel comfortable saying it's like near 100 times. And yeah, all 6 hours. So like 600 hours of my life. I've put 600 hours into Animal Crossing, so why not into Pride and Prejudice? It's so freaking good. Jennifer Ale is so, she just is Elizabeth Bennet. Now it's like in my brain, I've seen that movie so many times that when I read the book, I'm just like, yes, it's Jennifer Ale and Colin Firth. The Keira Knightley one is fun as well, but it's definitely like modernized. It's definitely like a 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice. I wouldn't call it like classic and evergreen. They change a lot of the wording. It's like simple things, like in the Keira Knightley one, Darcy goes, I love you most ardently, which isn't how he says it in the book. And it's like, I'm not even that much of a book snob where I'm like, it has to be exactly the book, but I just like it better in the book. I like it better that he's more subtle. That's kind of what makes Jane Austen romances kind of fun, because they're not so in your face. They're slow, they're just matter of fact. There's no like super intense flowery language trying to describe, you know, her heart beating or like his member getting hard. There's no sex. That's what's fun about it. You read it and you're like, oh, the tension's there. Okay, I don't need the sex. It was almost more horny because there's just tension and there's no sex. All right, moving on. Emma. Once you finish Pride and Prejudice, I think you should move on to Emma. Emma is so fun. It's so funny. It's a great story. The movie Clueless is a modern version of Emma. And honestly, if I were to pick one of the Jane Austen heroes to be my sexy time partner / husband, it would probably be Mr. Knightley. I just kind of like him the best. I feel like if Brian were to play one of the Jane Austen heroes, it would probably be Mr. Knightley, because we had like kind of a similar relationship where it's like Brian loves my family, he gets along with everybody, and he helps people out. He's a very supportive person, but he will also kind of point out when I'm being ridiculous in some sort of way. There's so many good movie versions of Emma. My favorite one is the most recent one. It just came out in 2020, right when the pandemic was hitting, because I had plans to go see it with my friends at theaters, and then we were kind of like, can we go to a theater? Kind of seems like things are getting scary, and then like the world shut down. And then it was available for streaming, but like at theater prices. I think it was like 21 bucks or something. And everybody was like, I'm not gonna pay $21 for a movie. And I was like, I'm gonna pay it. Fuck it, here, take all my money. I cannot wait to watch this. I ended up watching it 7 times in the 48 hours that I had it. It was right around St. Patty's Day when I watched it. I think it's the best time. And March is Women's Month. One of the reasons I love the 2020 Anya Taylor-Joy Emma is because it kind of explores like the ridiculous side of Jane Austen. Back in the Regency era, there were all these people behind the scenes. Nobody dressed themselves. They didn't cook their own meals. They didn't do any of that stuff. They had people like doing kind of everything for them. So at any given time, like during these dinners and these moments, these intimate moments, there is like a servant standing there. Yeah, they had servants. It's kind of fucked. The 2020 Emma kind of explores that in a really fun way. They kind of sprinkle it in throughout. They really explore the humor of Jane Austen, and the costumes are so beautiful. I like wished I could go back and redo my wedding, even though I wore a Regency era dress, like empire waist dress for my wedding. Still, I was like, oh, but now I want to go back and wear that orange thing that she wore. I also really like the Gwyneth Paltrow 1996 Emma. I know, go ahead, drag my little ass. I think Gwyneth Paltrow did a great job. I mean, her accent's not perfect, but I really don't think it's that terrible. But then again, I'm American. I don't know why they have American actors playing all these roles, but I think she did a fine job. And I think it's just like, it's fun. It's kind of well done front to back, in my opinion. Next, I think you should read Northanger Abbey. Northanger Abbey is one of my favorites. I like to read this in the fall time, actually, because it's got a little bit of haunted house spooky vibes to it, but it's a really, really funny book. She really is a very good comedic writer. It's got so many great characters. It has like a total douchebag, like mansplainer character in it who is so funny. He's so funnily written. The Felicity Jones version of Northanger Abbey is perfect. It's a perfect movie. It's so cute, and it has J.J. Fields playing the love interest, Mr. Tilney, and he's so hot. I really like the J.J. Field. Is it Field or Fields? I don't know. I like his version of Mr. Tilney a lot. When you read the book, he does have wildly sexist jokes. He has like a teasing quality to him, and he keeps teasing Catherine, and he's like, oh, but a lot of his teasing is like, women of course always do this. Kind of hard to stomach a little bit when you're reading it now. You know, I think it's like his growing point or whatever, but it's a fun teasy kind of back and forth. And I just really like Catherine as a character. She's kind of written as this very untalented, plain person who isn't super smart, you know, doesn't check all these boxes or anything. She just kind of is who she is, and she's like, I just like reading romance novels. That's what makes her so fun and so innocent and cute, and it makes her journey really sweet. So I really like Northanger Abbey. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Next up is Persuasion. Persuasion is a fantastic book. The premise is a little sad. You know, it's somebody who was persuaded out of being with her one true love, and it's 7 years later, I think, and feels like she lost him, and now she's gonna be a spinster or whatever. But don't let that get you or make you think like, oh, I don't want to read a sad book. It's actually not a sad book. It is funny and fun, just like the rest of them, which is why I will give maybe another hot take opinion. I don't think that there are any really good, fun, modern movie versions of Persuasion that really capture what the book is. Here's what I'll say. There's a version from the 70s, which used to be available for free on YouTube. I'm gonna see if it still is, and if it is, I'll link it below. That is honestly, in my opinion, the best version of Persuasion that is available to us. It's just kind of straightforward. They're very much on like a sound stage, you can tell, and they're also very much like in their 70s hair. And it's also very slow and very long, but it really just tells the whole story front to back. And I think it's really well done. I don't like the 90s version. I don't like the early 2000s version of Persuasion at all. Oh my gosh, it opens with this like POV camera. She's like running around the house. So over dramatic. There's a lot of shaky handheld camera stuff that I'm just, I'm not into it. And it's not funny and fun. I mean, I think that the opening scene of Persuasion, it's so funny. It's her dumbass dad. He can't handle the fact that they've lost all their money and they need to leave their house. And he's just like so pompous and narcissistic, and it's really funny and fun. And then the final scene, which I won't spoil it, but I think it's arguably the most romantic of all of the Jane Austen final scenes. The tension is just so much higher. It's like they really build it out. And I will also give a hot take, which is that I kind of liked the newest version, like the 2022 version that came out with the lady from the Sexy Time movie. Do you know what I'm talking about? 21 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Grey. Why 21? I agree that it's definitely not Persuasion. It's like she's not even trying to play this character of Anne Elliot. It's like she's trying to be Lizzie Bennet. And then there's these weird like takes to the camera where she kind of like talks to the camera. It very much dated itself as like, this is the 2022 version of Persuasion. However, I had a blast watching it. I think it's so fun as its own little standalone thing. Like I said, I'm not like that much of a book movie snob where I'm like, it has to be exactly the book. But if you're not comparing it to the book, then I think it's fun. I have fun with it. Drag me, drag me. All right, next, Sense and Sensibility. This, I think, is maybe the saddest of her books. Sometimes I'm like, I'm too sad to read that because they are grieving. The book begins with that they've lost their father. So just be aware that it is so good. It's such a beautiful exploration of family in a time of crisis and kind of banding together, and it still has a lot of funny elements to it. I mean, Jane Austen's sense of humor is always going to be there. It's so fun. Sorry, it's getting dark out there. I'm just gonna keep blasting through. Also, the movie version from 1990. Let me see. It came out in 1995, same year as Pride and Prejudice. And then the one with Paltrow, Emma, came out in 1996. It was mid-90s. Great time for Jane Austen fans. Anyway, it's just one of the best movies I've ever seen. It doesn't follow the book super accurately, but you know, Emma Thompson like helped with the screenplay or an adaptation or something, and then she's also starring in it. Freaking fantastic. I mean, it's a kind of a perfect movie. And Hugh Grant gives his second best performance, second only to his performance in Paddington 2. Hugh Grant's performance in Paddington 2, I think, somehow did something to the space-time continuum and like retroactively inspired Shakespeare to begin writing plays. It was that good. It was that good. There's also this movie version. It's another BBC television series. It's from 2008. It is also really, really good. I own both. That one's a little more, you know, following accurately to the book. And it has Dan Stevens in there, who some of you may know is my pandemic crush. I have a huge crush on him. Super romantic, a lot of tension building. Oh, all hope is lost. And then like, ooh, maybe not. And then we have Mansfield Park, and you can just skip this one. I'm just kidding, but it is my least favorite, and I've only actually read the book front to back once, and I was kind of like, okay, I'm done. Yeah, Fanny Price, she just kind of sucks. Mary, right? That's her name? You know, I could have looked this shit up before I made a video. She's kind of painted to be a little bit of a villain, but honestly, I'm with the folks who kind of think that maybe she's the protagonist and Fanny is the one who frickin' sucks. And this is also the only one that actually executes a cousin love story, and you know, it's just a little weird. And they like grow up together in the same house, and I'm kind of like, so they're cousins that are kind of like brother and sister. The movie version of Mansfield Park kind of makes Fanny out to be cooler. This is another one where she's like talking to the camera. I don't know what year it came out, 2000 some shit. And they make it where she's interested in being an author. The character in the book has no interests other than her cousin Edmund. And she likes riding horses and throws a fit at one point because they took her horse out when she wanted to ride her horse. I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I think most people agree that it's like her least fun book. I'm so sorry if you love this book, but I'm just kind of like yawn, boring. But I will say that the first time I went through all of Jane Austen's books, I mean, I still devoured it. I was so into Jane Austen world. So I still devoured it, and maybe you'll have the same experience. Fanny, I think she kind of sucks, but I had a great time. Whatever. This is the end of my Jane Austen journey. After you've finished Mansfield Park and you realize that you agree with me, you can read her unfinished works, which include Lady Susan, The Watsons, and Sanditon. You know, I read these and I was kind of like, oh, I'm getting into them, and then I got sad that they weren't finished and that she passed away before she got to finish them. But there's a great TV show version of Sanditon that I got to watch season 1 and then I couldn't watch season 2. This book I wanted to show y'all. It's called What Jane Austen Ate and Charles Dickens Knew. There are different versions of like this sort of book out there that I think is a really fun companion book to have with you while you're reading all of Jane Austen, because it just kind of goes through history and the life and times of people living in the Regency era, and it helps kind of explain some storylines and things. But I figured I would cover just a few little things really quick in this video to help get you started. Okay, so when you're reading these Jane Austen books, keep in mind everything was very gendered back then. I have a very complicated relationship with gender, but I'm just going to talk about men and women as they are described in these books just to like help you. So there were so many rules about men and women. Women were not allowed to just kind of like walk around by themselves. It was kind of seen as improper and like very dangerous. When there are these scenes of a woman walking by herself, that is seen as very like peculiar and like risky and stuff, just to help you paint a picture of kind of the characters. Also, physical touch was a big no-no. The only time men and women would actually make contact are simple little moments like helping her into a carriage, dancing at a ball, they could make contact. The reason that they threw balls all the time is because they were like, I never get to touch my crush. So there's gotta be a ball coming up soon so I can touch my crush. So balls were like a big deal. In these books, balls, the more I say balls, the more it's making me giggle, but balls play a huge role in these books. They help push along the storyline. They're kind of like the moments of intimacy that these characters are like craving and looking for. So keep that in mind when you read it. Also, they had these big group dances. People would have learned these dances from kind of like a dance teacher who would come and be like, here are the latest dances. So when you're watching all these Jane Austen movies and you see them, there's this one dance that you see a lot in a lot of these movies. It has the same song playing with it. That is an actual dance from Regency time. So balls, big deal. Everybody loves balls. And then there's this thing with like the naming system. So whoever the oldest child in a family is, they are known as Miss. So for example, there's 5 Bennet sisters. Jane Bennet is the oldest, and when they're being introduced in a group, this is Miss Bennet, and then they go through and they introduce the rest kind of in order of from oldest to youngest. So they'll go, this is Miss Bennet, and then this is Miss Elizabeth Bennet, this is Miss Mary Bennet, and they'll actually name the other ones. However, if Jane isn't there, then Elizabeth's the oldest in the room, and that's when they introduce her as Miss Bennet. Does that make sense? And you'll see that kind of happen all throughout. That's why it's like, it's Mr. Darcy, Mr. Knightley. They're not known by their first names. And Darcy's first name is Fitzwilliam. It's not that hot. Mr. Darcy's a little sexier, a little hornier. Money was a thing. There were women who did come into like huge fortunes and stuff. You meet a character named Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Like, she's a very rich, well-known, well-to-do lady. And Emma as well is going to inherit her father's house. However, there's something called entailments. You know, men owned everything. When it came to entailments, basically an arrangement could be made where somebody's like, this is my piece of property and I want it to be handed down only in my family. And that is the situation that the Bennets are in. The house is being entailed, and that can only be passed down to the next male heir. So the Bennet sisters are fucked because once their dad dies, none of them are going to get their house. It's going to be entailed away to their cousin. So that's why it's like so important that they all get married, because they basically will have no money once their dad dies. Not every family has like an entailment with their house, but it is a plot device used in a few of the different books. So marriage is a huge thing. You're kind of considered a spinster once you reach a certain age. I think 27 is kind of like, all right, well, now she's a spinster. In Emma, it's kind of fun because there is no dependency, and in fact, she's very much like, I'm never gonna get married. I don't care. And then elopements. Eloping didn't really mean what it means now. It pretty much meant like fucking. Running away with a man before you're married to him. That is just a huge, huge no-no. You ruin your own reputation. You ruin your family's reputation. There's all these stakes on women and their horniness. So that's a huge storyline that comes into Pride and Prejudice as well. Eloping and like running away together is a whole thing. And then Gretna Green was this place in Scotland that apparently you could go and kind of have a quick marriage. It was like Vegas, today's Vegas, where it's like you run away and you get like quickly married in Gretna Green. Yeah, and if I think of any more fun facts that'll help you immerse yourself in the world of Jane Austen in that Regency era, maybe I'll put them down in the description, but I feel like this video is already probably getting pretty long. You know me, I always am like, I'm gonna make a quick 5-minute video and then I end up talking so much. Please let me know if you end up reading some Jane Austen. It would make me so happy to know that you were in any way inspired to go on this journey. And then if you do go on the journey, please tell me how you're liking it. If you already love Jane Austen, feel free to drag me for any of my opinions or give your own opinions, or like let's start a dialogue and have some fun. Happy March, happy women's / people with ovaries month. I'll see you next time.